Back to politics now. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer saying President Trump is no closer to releasing his tax returns even after weekend protests drew crowds all around the country.
The president is under audit. It's a routine one. It continues. And I think that the American public know clearly where he stands. This was something that he made very clear during the election cycle. Joining me now to discuss this, I want to bring back Niall Stanage from The Hill, MSNBC contributor Howard Dean, former chairman of the Democratic National Committee, and MSNBC political analyst Hugh Hewitt is also back. Thanks to all of you. So, Governor Dean, I want to start with you and get your reaction to this. The fact that the president says, look, it's time to move on. He won the election. This was a campaign issue. Voters don't care. If you look at a poll taken in January by the Pew Research Center, 2/3 of voters actually say he should release his tax returns. What do you think?
He's got a problem because the sort of the odor of corruption is around him all the time. Nothing has been proved, but he's got people making money off this in his family and so forth and so on. It reminds me of Nixon, who said the American people deserve you to know if your president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. Well, if Trump releases his tax returns, we're going to find out a lot about whether there was or was not anything to do with the Russians, whether he did pay any taxes other than the one pager he released from 2005. I think he needs to release them, and I think the American people agree. And this is not going to go away, much as the White House would like to.
Hugh, Governor Dean's talking about the odor of corruption. Don't you want him to just release his returns and put this matter to rest once and for all?
Well, Kristen, I asked him to do that on the air and the radio in in January 15. I asked him again in the debates. He's not going to do it. And I know what the polls say, but the polls don't measure saliency. And it is not a hot-button issue for many Americans. I would just use some numbers. The Women's Day March on January 21st had more than 600 locations and more than 2 million participants. The march on Saturday, I don't know whoever scheduled that for Holy Week was out of their mind, drew 100,000 people at less than 100 places around the country. So while people answer the poll question, yeah, we'd like it, they don't really care that much about it. They cared a lot about Justice Gorsuch, who had his first case today. They care about their taxes and their health care. They care about the economy growing. But while you ask them about tax returns, they don't lose sleep over it, even unless they're named Howard Dean.
But politically, Niall, this continues to be a problem for this president because he keeps getting questions about it. And then it's compounded today by the fact that the White House has announced that it's not going to voluntarily release its visitor logs. I want to play some of what Sean Spicer had to say about that during today's briefing and get your reaction on the other side.
It's not a question of objecting. It's about following the law. We're following the law as both the Presidential Records Act and the Federal Records Act prescribe it. So it's the same policy that every administration had up until the Obama administration. And frankly, the faux attempt that the Obama administration put out where they would scrub who they didn't want put out didn't serve anyone well.
So he says it was faux transparency under the Obama administration. The reality is President Obama released 6 million logs of visitors. To what extent do you think that this compounds the transparency issue for the president?
I think it does so in a big way, Kristen, because this is a real difficulty. Whatever about the explanation that Sean Spicer wants to offer, if you are less transparent than a previous administration, it looks like you're hiding something. I take Hugh's point about taxes in isolation might not be a salient issue for millions of people, but when it is coupled or part in aggregate of this sense that something is being kept out of the public view, I think that's clearly a political problem.
And Hugh, let me go back to you on this point, because back in 2012, then Mr. Trump tweeted that President Obama was the least transparent president in history. Does this make him look less transparent than President Obama or hypocritical in any way?
Well, I do not like the White House logs decision. I've been saying that for 48 hours, 72 hours, forever when they made that. But I keep returning to the very basic political fact. Democrats are going to lose in Georgia tomorrow. They built up expectations, and Jon Ossoff isn't going to get a majority. They lost in Kansas last week. In fact, their turnout went from 80,000 voters in November to 55,000 voters last week. All of this talking up of issues that don't resonate with people in the blue wall states that turned red is just Democrats repeating the same mistake that they made in the fall, underestimating Donald Trump's appeal to people who feel left behind and talking about issues of great interest to Manhattan Beltway media elites, but which do not resonate with working-class Americans.
All right, I have to let Governor Dean jump in here on Georgia, because can Ossoff get 50%? Hugh says no.
Yeah, well, we'll see tomorrow. I think he will, but we'll see. I think the problem is, I think Hugh's right that this is not a burning issue. Here's the problem. It's drip, drip, drip. Every day there's an article about Trump and Russia. There's an article about how much money his family is making off his presidency. There's an article about lack of transparency, not releasing his tax returns. It's drip, drip, drip. The problem is there's no goodwill for Donald Trump. And this, every day, is something that's hurting his presidency. And sooner or later, and it's also going to hurt the Republicans. And that's why we're doing so well. You know, Hugh said, oh, well, he didn't do well in Kansas. We came in within 6 points of in one of the reddest districts in the country. And no matter what happens tomorrow, it has been a hell of a battle. And so we are energized on our side, and I think we're going to take back the House in 2018. I would never have said that 6 months ago.
Final point to Niall here. Governor Dean brings up what happened in Kansas. The Republican won, but he won narrowly in essentially a state that President Trump won handily. Do Democrats have the momentum right now, do you think, in a state like Georgia?
I think they do have the momentum, and just as importantly, they have the intensity. And I think that's what we're seeing in things like these massive fundraising totals that are being posted for the Democratic candidate. They have a lot of passion on their side. There's a sense, I think, that they were complacent last November. They don't seem inclined to make that mistake again.
That's a great point. Let me just raise one more issue here that we could go around the panel on, and that is taxes. Steve Mnuchin saying this about tax reform. Remember, he said he was going to look into it shortly. He says it started as an aggressive timeline. It's fair to say it is probably delayed a bit because of health care. Hugh, what do you make of that? How much urgency does there need to be for this president to get something big done on taxes so that he can tout a victory?
It's not urgent. What he needs to do is nominate 20 circuit court judges for the vacancies that exist. He needs to get a defense supplemental passed quickly because of the Korean crisis and our need to push back ISIS. And he needs to return to Obamacare. I think President Trump has a pretty good true north on what matters most, and taxes waiting to November does not bother me in the least. Judges not getting nominated bothers me. I think it bothers the people that sent him to the White House.
And Governor Dean, it's not entirely surprising that Steve Mnuchin is saying that, because realistically, once health care failed, it was going to be a lot tougher to get something done on tax reform. Is it all but impossible to get a big, comprehensive tax reform bill passed at this point? Is it better for the White House to focus on more targeted tax cuts? What do you think?
Well, I don't think they had any intention of passing a tax reform that was comprehensive. I think they simply wanted to, as Trump himself said the other day, now he's not going to close the carried interest loophole. His idea of tax reform is lowering taxes for people like him who make the kind of money he makes. He's not going to do anything for middle class people because that's really expensive. Giving small tax cuts to lots and lots of people is more expensive for the Treasury than giving fairly big tax cuts for a few billionaires. And that's always where he was going with this, and he's now publicly said that. So I actually think he'd do well not to tackle health care or tax reform, because they aren't going to benefit the American people. It's just going to make them madder, as it did when he tried to take away their health care.
Hugh, I'm getting a wrap, but just very quickly respond to that. Do you think the president can get tax reform done eventually, or does he need to be more targeted?
It's got to be more targeted. It's going to be next year. It's going to have to follow Obamacare repeal. And his numbers are going up as he gets more strategic, so I think he's doing the right thing and shifting away from it.
All right, great conversation. Thanks to all. Niall, Howard Dean, and Hugh Hewitt. Much appreciated.